America's college campuses are in a state of complete meltdown, at least in the blue states, where administrators are catering to the whims of America-hating, evil, radical people. The question everyone is asking right now is an easy question. Why are these students, the most privileged people in literally the history of the world, no skill set, no problems, why are they LARPing as terrorists and standing for murderous groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the like? Why are they overtly chanting anti-Semitic slogans? Why are they doing all of this? The answer is very simple. They want revolution. There's a professor at Northwestern University named Gary Saul Morrison, a really interesting book called Wonder Confronts Certainty, which is about the history of Russian literature. But what the book is really about is what he describes as a Russian type, the revolutionary. The revolutionary is typically from a well-off background, but in love with destruction for its own sake. So Bakunin, Mikhail Bakunin, is an anarchist, very famous anarchist. He famously said, the will to destroy is also a creative will. Or as the Marxist radical and pro-terror philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, quote, terror is justified violence against the practical inert. In 1918, there's a Russian poet named Alexander Blok, and he wrote an essay titled The Intelligentsia and the Revolution. In it, he argued that violence is an antidote to the boredom, the triviality of regular life. It will, quote, make everything over, change our false, boring, hideous life. This is called revolution. But here's the thing. Revolutionaries cannot succeed without mainstream support. During the lead up to the Russian Revolution, the so-called Constitutional Democratic Party openly cheered and encouraged terrorists, even fundraising for them. The party leader said after a massive terrorist attack in 1906, quote, condemn terror? Never. That would mean the moral death of the party. Naturally, when the Bolsheviks actually won, they killed or arrested all the leading members of the Constitutional Democratic Party. When it comes to our radicals, nothing has changed. We're talking about bored, middle to upper class kids, privileged by a system that has handed them literally everything, including admission to our top universities. But they've been given no mission by their parents and by their society other than to find themselves. They've been told that they are the smartest, the brightest, the people who are going to lead us to the future. But they've been given no actual set of values. And then they go to campus and they meet fellow revolutionaries and revolutionary professors who are also incredibly privileged, who inform them that the system that has given them their privilege is corrupt and evil. And they feel guilty. And the only way to alleviate that guilt is to join the revolution, to cosplay oppression. So they have to find a revolutionary cause, and then they have to LARP as revolutionaries oppressed by the system. They have to dissociate from their privilege. They have to join the mass of the supposedly oppressed. So here's the thing. Right now, what's going on these campuses, it feels like LARPing, right? Live action role playing. And maybe these idiots go on to integrate into more mainstream institutions, which they then destroy and corrupt from the inside. That actually has been the formula for the last several decades. And it has absolutely destroyed major American institutions, from universities to businesses. The radicals went into traditional American society, and instead of being shaped by those institutions, they shaped them. But there is, in fact, a darker and more violent path. That is the path where the LARPing for terrorism doesn't actually just stop at taking over campus buildings or assaulting Jewish students. That's the path where a few acts of violence blossom out. And the real revolution is now true violence. That's actually happened before in American history. In 1971 and 72 in the United States, there were 5 bombings a day in the United States. Groups ranging from the Black Panthers to the Symbionese Liberation Army, from the FALN to the Weather Underground, engaged in violent terrorism literally daily. The actual prediction for the United States is, why not both? The radicals will continue to be admitted to the halls of power on the one hand. They will increasingly engage in violence on the other, humored by the Democratic Party, as we'll talk about in a moment, propped up by a media, as we'll talk about in a moment. These terrible college students, people who believe truly evil things, will likely get more and more revolutionary, and a subset of them will not stop at building takeovers. All it takes is somebody to break the glass first. So what exactly is going to break the glass? What's going to move these people from taking over campus buildings into, say, bombings, for example? Well, it could be as simple as something like Donald Trump winning the 2024 election. Remember, while the student protesters were rioting in 1968, it actually took Richard Nixon's election to push those protesters underground and then into overt acts of routine terrorism. Given that the entire left in the United States has now deemed Donald Trump a fascist threat to the United States, would it be super shocking if the same students now barricading administration buildings on behalf of actual terrorist groups like Hamas, if they decide to ratchet up their quote-unquote intifada to the next level? That would not be shocking at all. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, can your savings weather another economic storm? Think about what you've put away for the future. Inflation can render cash worthless, and real estate can, in fact, crash, as it did in 2008. During times of economic uncertainty or market volatility, investors tend to flock to gold as a safe haven asset. Its value tends to increase during turbulent times, providing a buffer against market downturns. This is why people are flocking to gold right now and why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Birch Gold understands navigating financial decisions can be daunting. That's why their dedicated in-house IRA department is there to guide you every step of the way. Birch Gold is committed to addressing your questions and concerns promptly. Their team is always ready to provide answers and clarity. Whether it's about fees, taxes on rollovers, or the timing of the process, they're here to ensure you feel valued and well-informed. Text BEN to 989898. Talk to one of Birch Gold's experts. Claim your free info kit on gold. You'll learn how to convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. The best part is, it's not going to cost you a penny out of pocket. Just ask all your questions. Text BEN to 989898 to get started. Text BEN to 989898 to talk to my friends over at Birch Gold. Okay, so let's get to what happened at Columbia University while I was out on Passover break here. So Columbia protesters took over Hamilton Hall. This happened a little bit earlier in the week. According to the New York Post, a huge mob of masked pro-terror rioters broke into an academic building at Columbia University and seized it early on Tuesday, rebranding the iconic hall named after founding father Alexander Hamilton and draping it with a giant flag calling for intifada. Intifada, for people who are not familiar with the language that is used by terrorists, intifada is a violent revolution. The first intifada in Israel took place in the late 1980s. It was a violent uprising against the Israelis, which ended with hundreds of deaths. The second intifada was much more deadly. That happened in 2000, 2001, 2002. And that ended with thousands of Israeli deaths. So now you have these people who, again, are LARPing as actual terrorists because they have to dissociate from their privilege. So I'm not privileged. I'm just like the terrorists. I'm going to cosplay as the terrorists. As we'll see, they take this to the actual extreme of now mimicking the language that is being used by Hamas supporters in Gaza itself. So they took over an academic building at Columbia University. Apparently, a hammer-wielding demonstrator smashed through a glass panel door and placed what appeared to be a bike lock around the handles. They then draped giant signs from the building. Many of them were masking their faces like ISIS members. Once inside, some anti-Israel protesters quickly covered up security cameras with black trash bags and tape, according to the Columbia Daily Spectators. So the escalation prompted Columbia officials to shut down the campus on Tuesday. So, question number one, are all of these Columbia students? No. Many of these are professional protesters. And actually, there's a lot of tape that was showing all of these people arriving at Columbia University. Breitbart had tape of pro-Hamas youth flooding Penn Station to head on over to Columbia and join the party. You can see there's Queers for Palestine here, charging up into Penn Station to try and join the fray. And again, it's all good times. It's fun and games for the Hamas youth. The university spokesperson said that this protest was led by people unaffiliated with the campus, but that's not quite true. It turns out there were a lot of people who are quite affiliated with the campus, Columbia professors, Columbia students who were involved in all of this. They then started cosplaying as actual members of the Gazan population. The most obvious example of this, which is actually quite unintentionally hilarious, is there is a Columbia PhD student named Johanna King Slutsky. I didn't name her, not my fault. And she was demanding food be shipped in to the people who had just taken over an administration building. Because, as she said, they need humanitarian aid. So look at these Abercrombie-looking jack who are wearing designer gear as they cosplay as terrorists. Look at the guy sitting behind her with the bare midriff over here. This dude with the bare midriff and the keffiyeh. That guy lasts 5 seconds in the Gaza Strip before Hamas murders him. In any case, here she is saying that she is being victimized. These people took over a building at Columbia. They actually are going to Columbia to get a PhD from one of the most prestigious institutions in the United States. You know what this lady, by the way, is getting her PhD in? Let me read you her biography. This is from the Columbia University Department of English and Comparative Literature website. Quote, "My dissertation is on fantasies of limitless energy in the transatlantic romantic imagination from 1760 to 1860. My goal is to write a prehistory of metabolic rift, Marx's term for the disruption of energy circuits caused by industrialization under capitalism. I am particularly interested in theories of the imagination and poetry as interpreted through a Marxian lens in order to update and propose an alternative to historicist ideological critiques of the romantic imagination. Prior to joining Colombia, I worked as a political strategist for leftist and progressive causes and remain active in the higher education labor movement. So this is the very definition of a professional useless person. I can think of nothing more useless than that dissertation about metabolic rift and energy circuits, according to Marx, in the pre-romantic era. My God. And here is this lady wearing a keffiyeh, again, 5 seconds in Gaza with her friends from Hamas. Here she is explaining that she needs a shipment of humanitarian aid. The Israelis are blocking the convoys. The reason they're doing this is, again, the most privileged people in the world have to cosplay as people they believe are oppressed in order to dissociate from their own privilege. That's what this is. It would be hilarious were it not disturbing.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Colombia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
There's running water in all of those buildings. There's running water in all of those buildings. Also, you're not going to starve at Columbia University. Frankly, you look pretty well fed. This is a hot take here. Everyone owes you, really, you're suffering. Look at the great suffering from the bare midriff dude behind you in the Abercrombie outfit with the keffiyeh. It's a parody of itself, all of this. I mean, frankly, as a conservative, I'm rooting for these people to expose themselves, and they are, because America should see just how radical the agenda of the left is, and as we'll see, just how far Democrats are willing to go to pat these good little radical Trotskyites on the head. And so these protesters did come up with some creative ways of getting food into the building. Like, for example, I swear, if ever there were a zombie apocalypse, these people get eaten first because they clearly have no life skills. Here are some of these protesters literally loading pizza onto milk crates, which they are then bringing up to the windows via rope, like the Lorax or something. Here we go.
Here outside this main building at Columbia University are providing food and supplies to the protesters who have barricaded themselves inside. In fact, you can see a pizza box right there getting ready to be hauled up. These protesters have locked themselves inside Hamilton Hall. This happened earlier today. And take a look at this. One of the protesters is actually putting a pizza box inside this crate that they've attached to a rope.
What I appreciate about the reporter's description there is it's like listening to a nature reporter discuss how a monkey is using a tool in order to get ants out of an anthill. It's like, wow, look at that. Using a tool. You're literally taking a pizza box and putting it on a crate to get pizza to your friends from Uber Eats because you're all idiots. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First of all, Jeremy, Caleb, and I were building our business. We looked for no-brainer companies to help streamline our processes. Stamps.com does exactly that. If we'd wasted hours at the post office all day, every day, we wouldn't have been able to grow into the company we are today. Stamps.com lets you print your own postage and shipping labels from your home or office. It's incredibly convenient. You can prepare your shipping labels in minutes and get back to running your business sooner. Even better, you can take care of orders from anywhere with their mobile app. Scheduling package pickups is easy through the Stamps.com dashboard. For 25 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable to over 1 million businesses. You can print postage wherever you do business. There are no lines, traffic, no waiting. They'll even send you a free scale so you'll have everything you need to get started. Sign up at Stamps.com/Shapiro for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and free digital scale. No long-term commitments, no contracts. Just go to Stamps.com/Shapiro. Again, that's Stamps.com/Shapiro. It is, in fact, a wonderful way for your company to save time and save money. There's no reason to waste time schlepping a bunch of packages down to the post office. Instead, save time and money over at Stamps.com/Shapiro for that 4-week trial plus free postage and free digital scale. Now, again, it's easy to upplay the stupidity and downplay the evil, but actually there are people who believe quite evil things and have engaged in actual criminal activities here. No one would be allowed to take over these buildings for as long as these students were allowed to take over these buildings, except that the administration appeases them, as we'll get to in just one moment. So it took Colombia fully 24 hours to ask the NYPD to intervene. And the NYPD then did. The New York City mayor, Eric Adams, he put out a call for all of the kids to clear the area. So here was Mayor Adams suggesting that all parents should call their kids and tell them to clear. First of all, these parents are awful. I'm just going to point out, if your kid is at one of these protests, you're a bad parent. You're a bad parent. You did a terrible job parenting. End of story. Here's Eric Adams.
Maybe some of the students involved don't understand what they are involved in. We urge those and everyone else violating Colombia's order to leave the area and leave the area now. And if you are a parent or guardian of a student, please call your child and urge them to leave the area before the situation escalates in any way. This is for their own safety and for the safety of others.
Naturally, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who is another person who cosplays the revolution, she put out a tweet saying, quote, "If any kid is hurt tonight, responsibility will fall on the mayor and university presidents. Other leaders in schools have found a safe, de-escalatory path. This is the opposite of leadership and endangers public safety, a nightmare in the making. I urge the mayor to reverse course." So not the complete takeover of the campus, the harassment of Jewish students, the violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. No, all of that is fine with Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. The real problem is when you clear the criminals from the campus. That's when you have a real problem. Because again, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, the Abercrombie model for the revolution. Well, the NYPD eventually did go in. They went in late last night. They cleared the entire place in a couple of hours. About 200 police officers, some in riot gear, descended onto the Manhattan campus. According to Politico, they arrested dozens and cleared the building that protesters occupied overnight. Here is some of the footage of that clearing.
We're witnessing is NYPD officers in full riot gear entering Hamilton Hall on Columbia University's campus in New York City. There are a group of about 60 people inside that building. It's unclear if they're all students, whether there are outside groups or agitators that have installed themselves in the building. The echoes of 1968 are undeniable, especially in this moment. You see just an enormous police presence. That's a crane that they're walking up to get into the building as the main entrance has been barricaded.
So first of all, if this were 1968, I promise you the police are not going in the second story window. The police are going in the first story and they are blowing their way in. Okay, so the NYPD went in. There were no real injuries as far as we are aware. And then the NYPD laid out some charges. They said that for the individuals inside Hamilton Hall, they will be charged with burglary in the third degree, criminal mischief, and trespassing. The individuals that are on campus outside, they will be charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct. Per a memo from Colombia, students who took over Hamilton Hall are now facing expulsion. Now, facing expulsion probably means that they're readmitted to the campus almost immediately and treated as heroes, because that's the way these campuses have historically been operating, as we'll get to in just one moment. The Deputy New York Police Department Commissioner, Tariq Shepard, explained on Morning Joe exactly who was inside. What he says is a lot of these people are professional agitators.
Tell us about this change.
Yeah, so when we entered Hamilton Hall, this is not what students bring to school. Okay, this is what professionals bring to campuses and universities. These are heavy industrial chains that were locked with bike locks, and this is what we encountered on every door inside of Hamilton Hall. And so in order for our emergency services group to enter into the building, they had to first cut through these chains, but also get rid of debris and barricaded doors that were barricaded with refrigerators, vending machines, chairs, you name it. They pushed it up against those doors to try and stop us from coming in. But our guys would not be stopped. They did a fantastic job of entering into that location and taking people into custody without incident last night. They took about 40 to 50 people into custody inside of the lobby of Hamilton Hall last night.
Very difficult to see how the president of Columbia University, who is yet another plagiarist in a high position, who has done no serious academic work, Minouche Shafik, hard to see exactly how she remains at Columbia. So she recently testified in front of Congress where she admitted that people chanting full-scale anti-Semitic slogans is in fact a violation of the rules and regulations at Columbia University. Again, if you want to get into the free speech issue, that is a different issue than the Student Code of Conduct or Title VI, both of which may in fact infringe on free speech concerns, but Columbia is in fact a private college, and Title VI has been upheld by the Supreme Court for good or for ill. In any case, she said all of that in front of Congress, and then she proceeded to allow all of this to blossom on her campus for fully 2 weeks, ending with the police invading a building. Hard to see how she holds on. Right now, everybody is doing the same thing they did with Cloudy and Gay over at Harvard, where they're mouthing platitudes about how she has to remain. She's so wonderful because she's diverse, of course. But in reality, is she going to last very long? I sort of doubt it. But here's the thing. What started at Columbia has not ended at Columbia, of course. The chaos has now engulfed many campuses across the country. Just down the street at City College, our friend Ami Horowitz went over to the encampment. This is a couple of days ago. It was last Friday, I believe. And he committed the grave sin of holding an American flag, because what he wanted to see is whether these people, in fact, are just quote unquote anti-Israel, or whether they actually just kind of hate America. Get to more on this in just a moment. First, the NBA playoffs are heating up. There's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. If you want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community every week. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you've got a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you. The rest of your entry will stay live. Producer Jake, he's been loving Prize Picks. He likes the easy-to-use interface. He's been getting in on the NBA playoff action. Download that Prize Pick apps today. Use code BEN for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Use code BEN on the Prize Picks app for a first deposit match up to $100. Lots of action this time of year. Use code BEN over at Prize Picks app and get that first deposit match up to $100. So Ami was not wearing any Jewish paraphernalia. He was not wearing an Israeli flag, anything like that. He's just holding an American flag. They immediately jump him and try to beat the hell out of him.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I'm not getting off campus. Get the off of me. Get out. Are you gonna hurt me?
Get out.
You gonna attack me? I'm not scared of man. I'm not scared of
They steal his flag, they pull it down, and then they start pushing him around and trying to beat him up.
I'm not scared of
The police, of course, remove Ami while leaving the protesters there for another several days. They detained Ami. Again, carrying an American flag on a college campus these days, a dangerous business. Wearing Hamas gear, apparently, is what gets you in good with the crew.
Don't choke me. What the I'm a fucking American. I want to go to
You can see men who are in full Muslim ritual regalia who are pushing Ami around over here.
Punch me all you want. I'm not leaving.
He was punched in the face. He was thrown downstairs. Again, all for the great sin of carrying the American flag, which of course makes perfect sense because over at City University of New York, the protesters had actually taken down the American flag and replaced it with the Palestinian flag, which is a good demonstration of exactly what they believe to be the priority. The NYPD finally took back the campus last night, at which point they actually removed the Palestinian flag and replaced it with the American flag. This is a low-level cosplay Iwo Jima stuff here. Here they are pulling down the Palestinian flag and tossing it aside, and then raising the American flag, which, you know, again, this shouldn't have to happen in the United States of America. This is not something that should have to happen on city-funded campuses. And meanwhile, over at University of North Carolina, again, we talk about people who believe that they are privileged and thus, if they join the revolution, they can do whatever they want. Some of that video involves, for example, white protesters throwing water at black police officers at the University of North Carolina.
What I can tell you is that this is a very intense escalation from how it has been for the past several hours.
There was pink-haired protesters here throwing water on black police officers. This black police officer is just standing there and taking it. But these are obviously delightful, diverse people, white people who believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, unless you're a black police officer. Obviously, arrests were made at the University of North Carolina, and that protest was in fact cleared. At George Washington University, over in Washington, D.C., pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters defaced a statue of George Washington. They put a keffiyeh on him. They spray painted the base of the statue to say genocidal warmongering university instead of George Washington. Stickers reading "End the Genocide, Free Palestine," and anti-fascist action were placed all over the statue of George Washington. Again, these people hate America. Okay, the system they're rebelling against is not the system of Israel. They're rebelling against America. They're rebelling against the very system that gave them the privilege they currently enjoy. And they are doing so. They are spitting in the face of that system, specifically because they have never been given a purpose or a set of values by their parents or by the society around them. This problem with our young people goes bone deep in an America that does not give young people any sense of what virtue or purpose look like. Okay, so you can see the camera approaching You can see they totally defaced this statue. Like, just totally defaced it. Because George Washington is bad, guys, as you know. Meanwhile, over at UCLA, all hell broke loose last night when the UCLA administration decided to allow a bunch of pro-Hamas protesters to literally block people from getting to class. They blocked thoroughfares. There was a report that they had assaulted a Jewish student. And here they were blocking students from going to class. They had given their fellow protesters wristbands in order to allow them admission to the campus. They could have done it the other way. They could have just given all the Jews Jewish stars, and then they could have told them they weren't allowed to cross the campus. That would have been the other way to do it. So here they are blocking people from going to class over at my alma mater, UCLA.
We're going this way. You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Why can't I go? Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
We're not engaging in that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not engaging in that.
Okay, we're going. We're going. I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them. I'm not hurting them. That's what they do. That's what they do, everybody. You guys are promoting aggression. You guys are promoting hate.
Okay, by the way, if this were a bunch of white supremacist students blocking black students from going to class, it would look like 1955 Birmingham, Alabama. This is at UCLA in 2024, and there's a bunch of pro-Hamas students who are blocking Jewish students from going to class because they disagree with the pro-Hamas agenda of these particular students. LA Mayor Karen Bass, and who is appeasing these protesters, as we'll see, there's a running theme that we'll get to in a moment, is the Democrats appeasing these people and administrations appeasing these people. Because again, in order for revolutionaries to gain power, they need mainstream liberals to pat them on the head and tell them they're doing a good job. They might be a little too passionate, but they're good people who are doing good things. Here is the LA Mayor Karen Bass, who herself is a left-wing radical, saying that both USC and UCLA are peaceful, which is weird because USC just canceled its own commencement because it was afraid of violence.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you about the scenes we're seeing, and we were just discussing at the top of our show at both UCLA and USC, these campus protests over the war in Gaza. How do you think the schools have handled them?
Well, I think the schools both schools have handled them the best that they can. But I will tell you that right now, both USC and UCLA are peaceful. I know that the administration is talking to the protesters and trying to come to a peaceful resolution. So I feel good that we will get there.
Okay, so was it peaceful? It turns out not, because it turns out that a bunch of people from the Jewish community in Los Angeles were tired of having their students pushed around by these protesters. So they started a counter-protest. And then last night, violence broke out, because this is what happens when you refuse to enforce the law. People take the law into their own hands. And the counter-protesters are doing nothing more illegal than the actual protesters. It is equivalently illegal. Here we go. You can see it turns into a bit of a brawl. People whacking each other with sticks. I think that's some pepper spray that's being fired over there. This is happening in America, at college campuses. Again, this is my alma mater. I know exactly where they are. I mean, this is like, I used to walk here every single day. This is what happens at the college campuses you pay for. By the way, all these moron students, Joe Biden wants you to pay for their student loans. So I hope that you're ready to pay for the student loans of the Marxist theory professor candidate at Columbia University who says that she's being denied humanitarian aid because they won't allow her Uber Eats in. I hope that all these moron protesters who are physically assaulting Jewish students, I hope that you're ready to pay for their student loans. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First, everybody thinks that mortgage rates are very, very high. That's not totally true. Mortgage rates are still a lot lower than, say, credit card rates of like 22%. Think about how much interest you'll pay on that credit card if you only make the minimum payment every month. If you're a homeowner, a cash-out refi with American financing can help you pay off that debt and lower your monthly expenses. The mortgage interest is tax-deductible. American financing saves homeowners like you an average of $854 a month. Their salary-based mortgage consultants will show you how much you can save every month. No upfront fees, no obligation. You might even close in as fast as 10 days and possibly delay a couple of mortgage payments, giving you greater savings upfront. Don't wait another day to get the financial relief you need. Break free from the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. Call American Financing at 866-721-3776. 866-721-3300. If you call today, you might not have to make next month's mortgage payment. That's 866-721-3300 or visit AmericanFinancing.net. NMLS 182334, NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Again, check them out at 866-721-3300. Okay, so one of the things you heard there from Karen Bass is the basic problem that you have if you're on the left, which is, well, they're negotiating with the students. They're negotiating. They're negotiating. Okay, here's the thing. You should not be negotiating with people who are violating the law. That is a stupid thing to do. You enforce the law. Why exactly would you negotiate with these protesters? The answer is because you're playing an inside-outside game. You're playing an inside-outside game in which you agree with the actual goals of the protesters. And so what you do is you allow them to do their nonsense. And then you proclaim that while you're against the most violent nonsense they're doing, you do have to negotiate to de-escalate. De-escalation is the key. You know what it turns out is the best way to de-escalate these protests? Arrest the people who are violating the law. You know how I know that? Because they've been doing it in, say, Florida, where they simply arrest people who violate the law, or Texas, where they simply arrest people who violate the law. At these blue college campuses, what they are doing is they are playing a radical inside-outside game where the radical agitators do illegal things, and then instead of the administrators calling in the cops to clear the encampment, for example, the Hamas homeless shelters, instead of them doing, as one of my friends, a young student over at Harvard University, who's currently suing the university, says, these Hamas homeless shelters, these, instead of simply enforcing the law, the administrators have decided that they are going to play footsie with the protesters because they actually agree with the protesters. So over at Brown University, which is a repository of pretty much all pink hair dye in the nation, Brown University, I visited all of these universities over the course of years. Brown University is by far the most left-wing college campus I've ever visited. It is there are no conservatives within about a 200-mile radius of Brown University. In any case, Brown decided that they were basically just going to cave in to the protesters. President Christina Paxson announced Tuesday students will end their encampment after an agreement was reached between school administrators and leaders of the protest to hold an Israel divestment vote. The school agreed to let 5 students meet with the corporation of Brown University in May to argue why they should vote to divest from companies associated with Israel or the war in Gaza. The Advisory Committee on University Resources Management will also provide recommendations related to divestment by the end of September. The board will vote on the policy in October. In exchange, students have agreed to take down the encampment and not violate the school's rules around protesting through the end of the academic year. Okay, so note the timing here. Here's what's actually going to happen. They told them take down the encampment, and then next year, we'll allow you to have a meeting with the corporation of Brown. What do you think is going to happen if the Brown Corporation says, guess what? We're not divesting from Israel, because it turns out that virtually every major company has investments in Israeli technology. You think the protesters aren't going to come back? Of course they're going to come back. Meanwhile, at Northwestern University, they are also caving to the protesters. Apparently, after 5 days of anti-Israel demonstrations occupying Deering Meadow on Northwestern University's campus, Northwestern President Michael Schill and the rest of the university's leadership decided to accede to several of the protesters' demands. The university released a list of concessions in a celebratory statement Monday afternoon in exchange for the removal of the encampment on the lawn. Here's the thing, you don't have to exchange anything. You call in the cops and you expel the students, and this never happens again. It's that simple, unless the administrators want the students to succeed. They believe that they are teaching them the way that things are done in the real world. As I said at the very top of the show, there are 2 ways this goes for a lot of these students. One is that they end up marginalized and some of them end up committing violence. The other is they end up mainstreamed into institutions where they are told that if they invade the Google CEO's office, they won't be fired, they will be catered to. And that's what they are being taught at Northwestern University. So Northwestern is offering full ride scholarships to Palestinian students and guaranteed faculty jobs for Palestinian academics. So in other words, after the worst terror attack on Jews since World War II by Palestinian terrorist groups, supported in large part by Palestinian civilians, Northwestern is now going to offer full ride scholarships to all Palestinian students and guaranteed faculty jobs for Palestinian academics. Unbelievable. USC is meeting with protesters. UCLA has been meeting with the protesters. In a second, we'll get to the Biden administration, which is just university faculty writ large. We'll get to that in just one moment. First, let's be real about this. Men's health products, they suck. They're either too woke, or they're too bro, or they were made for grandpa. What you need right here is this, the brand new Emerson multivitamin from Responsible Man. Responsible Man is a new company from Daily Wire Ventures dedicated to bringing you the best high-quality men's health products. Your modern diet is often deficient in key vitamins and minerals, leaving you weakened and diminished, unable to reach your full potential. which is why we created this, the Emerson multivitamin. The Emerson multivitamin is a physician-formulated, robust supplement made of 33 key premium ingredients that help fill your nutrient gaps to support immune system, maintain energy production, sharpen brain cognition, support the health of your heart and muscles. Emerson comes in an exceptional matte black aluminum tin. Look, it's beautiful. It's not going to sully your bathroom counter. The manly green vitamin capsules are smooth, they are easy to take, and the best part, they are mint essence. They have a great smell and taste as well. As a dude, you have people relying on you and the world conspires to see you fail. With so much chaos and uncertainty, it's crucial to take charge of your life and responsibilities. That starts with the Emerson multivitamin, a simple daily discipline to make the most of yourself, live up to responsibility, exceed others' expectations. As part of this exclusive Daily Wire launch, you can now save 30% off by visiting responsibleman.com. Emerson multivitamin is currently in stock. It ships immediately. There's a limited number available, so take advantage today. Save 30%. I take it every morning. That's responsibleman.com to take responsibility today. Well, meanwhile, the question here is, what is Joe Biden doing about all this? Because here's the thing. He could do something. So Miguel Cardona, the Secretary of Education, he was asked in a recent House hearing, if a school refuses to comply with Title VI, could you just remove the funding? In other words, if you wanted to get the administration to enforce Title VI says that you cannot be harassed or intimidated on a college campus on account of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and all the rest. If you wished to enforce that, could you threaten withdrawal of student funding? And Cardona says, sure, of course you could.
And ultimately, if a school refuses to comply with Title VI, yes, we would remove federal dollar.
Okay, but you're not doing that. In fact, you're not even threatening to do that. Why? Because the Biden administration is in the same position as the original Constitutional Democratic Party in Russia. They like patting the radicals on the head. They've been doing this since 2020 when Kamala Harris was talking about bailing out rioters in the middle of Black Lives Matter summer. Okay, so they're still doing the same thing. Joe Biden is terrified of alienating the so-called youth vote, despite the fact that they are low-propensity voters who hate him anyway and will likely vote for Cornel West or Jill Stein. He is still trying to cater to these people. Everyone knows this, by the way. Axios itself has an entire report today titled Joe Biden's Tough Options as Gaza Protests Unravel on College Campuses. Why are these tough options? In fact, they're very easy options. Tell the administrators to clear the encampments. It's very simple. Instead, for Biden, the barricades and broken glass on college campuses are a brutal reminder that America has not snapped back to the normalcy he promised in his 2020 campaign. A day after the dramatic takeover of Columbia University building, the White House is facing a year-end exam with no good answers. One, they can have Biden forcefully and personally condemn the protesters and risk alienating the same young voters the president needs to be more energized to win in November. B, Biden can stand in solidarity with the protesters and offend the centrists. Or C, they can have spokespeople make calls for civil and peaceful demonstrations with no real expectation that students will pay them any heed. The Biden administration has been taking the last option, of course. And that's why Joe Biden was saying, I don't like anti-Semitic rhetoric, but also people who don't understand the plight of the Palestinians. Joe Biden's his entire campaign plan is stay upright and try to hide for the rest of the campaign. It's not going to work, by the way. He's the president. In fact, how much is he trying to hide? There's a story from Axios just the other day that his handlers are so afraid of him looking like a doddering old fool that they've now surrounded him with members of his entourage. When he walks from the White House to the helicopter, he doesn't look like he's stumbling out there because every time there's a shot of him alone on the White House lawn walking, it looks as though he's about to faceplant. So now they've decided they're going to surround him with a scrum of colleagues. Here's what that looks like.
Mr. President!
So again, this is what they've decided to do here. Look what they do. They try to obstruct the cameras by walking in tandem with him in order so that you can't actually see him doddering along across the lawn. Absolutely. But that is the Biden administration in a nutshell. It's a doddering old man who has no actual moral view on this. He's sympathetic to the viewpoints of many who are pro-Hamas in the Ute, and he is unwilling to simply come out against them, despite the fact that they are harassing the living hell out of his administration. Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, he was at a hearing yesterday, and naturally, at the Senate hearing, the protester showed up to tell him that he was supporting a genocide. By the way, Israel is not committing a genocide. Only morons believe Israel is committing a genocide. You have to be completely idiotic to believe that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. Israel's complete air superiority over the Gaza Strip. If they wish to kill literally 1.5 million people, they have the capacity to do so. They have not done that. They've taken more humanitarian measures than any military in the history of the world. Literally the history of the world. But here's Lloyd Austin being harassed by the protesters, the same protesters that Joe Biden won't just announce.
So we're grateful for our partners in Congress who help
How can you talk about U.S. leadership when we're supporting
fighting genocide in Gaza.
Committee will come to order. I'd like to formally request those in the audience causing disruption to cease their actions immediately. Security, I'm going to ask you to remove the disruptive person.
This is every Biden appearance from now until the election, by the way. Get ready for the convention in Chicago because it's going to be a berserk convention over in Chicago. By the way, again, these people are supported by high-level members of the Democratic Party. So Tommy Vietor, who, believe it or not, was treated as an upper-level advisor to Barack Obama. Tommy Vietor, who started off as a guy who drove Barack Obama's van. No kidding. After NYPD poured into Columbia University to raid the encampment, he tweeted out, "This is effing horrifying." He said, "Amazing how many people in this country have internalized the idea that if you break the law, you don't just get arrested, but the police have a right to beat the bleep out of you in the process, tase you, break your bones." Well, actually, that's not what the video shows. What it shows is people resisting arrest and then the police using necessary force in order to do that, in order to arrest them, to effectuate the arrest. But Tommy Vietor is, of course, sympathetic to the pro-Hamasniks. Ben Rhodes' literal nickname in the White House, he was the top foreign policy advisor to Barack Obama. His literal nickname in the White House, according to multiple books, was Hamas. Not kidding. That was his actual nickname in the White House. Meanwhile, Ilhan Omar, she visited the Colombia encampment to visit her daughter, who I'm sure scored 1550 on the SATs. And she then proceeded to call the Jews pro-genocide. This is a couple of days ago.
How do you think this will translate to the Jewish students who are facing anti-Semitism here on campus?
So I actually met a lot of Jewish students that are in the encampment. And I think it is really unfortunate that people don't care about the fact that all Jewish kids should be kept safe and that we should not have to tolerate anti-Semitism or bigotry for all Jewish students, whether they are pro-genocide or anti-genocide.
Pro-genocide or anti-genocide. So according to her, the people who are proclaiming their Judaism, which is very convenient, by the way, the as a Jew crew, let me speak as a Jew, okay? As a person who actually believes this stuff, who actually practices, who prays 3 times a day, who just took days off for Passover, let me explain. If you are at a pro-Hamas encampment, you are not a Jew in any real sense. You are what we would call a halachic Jew if your mom is Jewish, but you are less Jewish than a ham sandwich. You are not in any real sense Jewish. And when you pull out your as a Jew card only so that you can rip on Israel and rip on other Jews and proclaim solidarity with people who want to murder Jews, you deserve zero respect. The only people, by the way, in this entire debate who are pro-genocide are the people who support Hamas, which is an actual openly genocidal group. Jared Moskowitz, who's a Democratic Party member in Florida, he himself was ripping Ilhan Omar. This is creating a real rift inside the Democratic Party because they're still sane Democrats and they're fighting the insane Democrats. And then you have all of the wishy-washy people right in the middle. Here's Moskowitz going after Ilhan Omar.
Listen, I have been to Colombia. I have talked to Jewish students. I have talked to the parents. And while there are peaceful protesters, while we do not want to lose sight, obviously, of the plight of the people in Gaza, it's a real war, and it's terrible what's happening to the people in Gaza. Make no mistake about it, there is a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism on what's going on these college campuses. We have members in this body pouring gasoline on that by saying Jews fall into 2 buckets, pro-genocide and anti-genocide. I mean, I got a 10-year-old and 7-year-old Jewish children. I don't know if they're pro-genocide or anti-genocide. I guess I'll talk to them about that.
Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, so that is from the rational side of the Democratic Party. Then you have the people who are too wishy-washy. So Pete Aguilar from California, for example, he was asked about Ilhan Omar's comments. He said, it's not the language I would have chosen. And they still have to pat the radicals on the head because they don't want to alienate the radicals.
It's not the language I would have chosen. It's not something I would have said.
Oh, wow.
And as I mentioned previously, I think we all have an obligation to turn the temperature down, especially when we're in those positions where people are listening to us and when we're speaking to people who feel passionate about issues. We do that in our own offices. We do that in our districts, every week, every month. That's important, but it's not language I would use.
We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, $20 will barely buy you anything these days. Thanks, Joe Biden. You can't even fill your gas tank for less than $20. But do you know what $20 will get you? Well, from the cell phone company I use, Pure Talk, you can get unlimited talk, text, plenty of 5G data for just $20 a month. Pure Talk gives you the same quality of service as your current cell phone provider, but for about half the cost. The average family saves almost $1,000 a year, all with no contracts and no activation fees. You can switch to Pure Talk and keep the phone and phone number you currently use, or you can take advantage of their great deals on the latest iPhones and Androids. Making the switch is incredibly easy. Their U.S. customer service team can help you join Pure Talk in as little as 10 minutes. Choose to spend your hard-earned money with a wireless company that shares your values, supports our military and veterans, creates American jobs, and refuses to advertise on, the fake news networks. Stop spending a ridiculous amount of money on your phone plan. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Right now, my listeners can get an additional 50% off their very first month of coverage. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro. Again, puretalk.com/Shapiro to get started. My listeners get 50% off their very first month. puretalk.com/Shapiro. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer, who is another one of these people who's patting the radicals on the head, he's a liar. How's he a liar? Because Chuck Schumer is a Jewish member of Congress. He has spent his entire career making this pun about his name where he says his last name Schumer is similar to the Hebrew word shomer, which is guardian. So he'll go to pro-Israel rallies and he'll talk about how he's a guardian of the Jews, of Jewish people in the United States. He's a shomer. The only thing that he'll say is that he's upset when people break windows. As far as the rabid anti-Semitism of a huge part of the Democrat support base, there apparently he has no problem. He's happy to get up on the floor of the Senate and call for the ouster of the sitting democratically elected government of the state of Israel. But he has real problems condemning, people who are chanting from the river to the sea or suggesting that it's time to globalize the Intifada. He's just upset about the broken windows.
I'd like to begin today by saying a few things about the protests at Columbia University. Smashing windows with hammers and taking over university buildings is not free speech. It is lawlessness. And those who did it should promptly face the consequences that are not merely a slap on the wrist. Free speech, discussion, and even strong disagreement are fundamental American values, and campuses should be places where those values are cherished. Campuses cannot be places of learning and argument and discussion when protests veer into criminality. And those who commit such acts are doing nothing to convince others that their cause is just.
Well, they've already convinced you that their cause is just, which is why you won't actually just condemn their cause, which is wrong. That would be the big problem inside the Democratic Party. Again, all of this is because Joe Biden simply wants to win Michigan. He's just over, all I want to do is win Michigan. They won't let me win Michigan. Oh. So he's not going to condemn any of this. He's just going to sit there and hope that time passes him by because it's worked for him in the past. So Joe Biden, again, he is attempting to win Michigan, and he believes that if he splits the baby on Gaza, on Israel, and if he is very nice to these awful protesters who believe evil things, then magically this will allow him to win Michigan. Well, first of all, it is dramatically stupid because if you actually look at the polling data in the United States, the American people do not agree with a ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas is extirpated. So the media keeps citing polls suggesting that Americans want a ceasefire in Gaza. It depends which question you ask. If you ask the question, do you favor or oppose a permanent ceasefire in Gaza? 70% say yes. If you ask, would you favor or oppose that ceasefire if it meant Hamas was allowed to continue to hold hostages and continue to run Gaza? 68% said no. By the way, that last question is the more accurate one. The first one's like, would you like world peace? Sure, I'd love world peace. And it's like, would you like world peace if the terrorists get to run the world? No, I don't like world peace anymore. 61% of respondents answered a ceasefire should only happen after the release of all hostages and Hamas being removed from power. So again, as far as whether Israel should move forward with an operation in Rafah to finish the war with Hamas, 72% say yes. There's no such thing as a 70-30 proposition in American politics anymore. 70% of the American public is in favor of Joe Biden letting Israel finish this war in Gaza so everybody can go back to their daily lives. So what is Joe Biden doing? He's proposing two of the dumbest policies I have ever heard. So policy number one, according to CBS News, the Biden administration is now considering bringing certain Palestinians to the United States as refugees, offering a permanent safe haven to some of those fleeing war-torn Gaza. Senior officials across several federal U.S. agencies have now discussed the practicality of different options to resettle Palestinians from Gaza who have immediate family members who are American citizens or permanent residents. Okay, no. The answer to that is no. No and no and no. You know what Joe Biden's math here seems to be? It seems to be that if you are from an area of the world where by every available metric you support terrorism, hate America, and hate Jews, if you then get attacked by the Israeli military because your elected government and the government you support and you cheered murdered 1,200 Jews, Then when Israel comes back in, then we will let you into the United States. Are you insane? Are you crazy? That's insane. Why would you let Egypt won't let any of them in. Jordan won't let any of them in. Saudi won't let any of them in. UAE won't let any of them in. Bahrain won't let any of them in. Lebanon won't let any of them in. Why do you think that is? Do they have more in common? Do you think the Palestinians in Gaza have more in common with the Palestinians in, say, Jordan, or with like a normal American family in Dubuque? What do you think? Just on average. The answer, obviously, is Jordan. Why won't they let them into Jordan? Because they know that they are a destabilizing force, that they are radicalized, that they don't like the Hashemite dynasty, that every single area where the Palestinian population has ever been a large percentage of the population, the regime has been destabilized, from Jordan to Lebanon to Gaza to the West Bank to Cyprus, literally everywhere. Like, this is nuts. Joe Biden suggesting that the solution here is for the United States to absorb refugees from the most pro-terror region on the planet is totally nuts. And when Joe Biden says these people are vetted, no, they're not. By whom? By whom are they vetted? Using what metric are they vetted? First of all, Hamas is a terror group. It's not just the government. It's a terror group, honeycombed throughout the society. If there is a 20-year-old living in the Gaza Strip before October 7th, what do you think are the chances that person has had a fairly open relationship with Hamas at some time in the past? The answer is very, very high, which is why the UNRWA is shot through with Hamas supporters. This is nuts. Joe Biden suggesting the admission of these folks is crazy. According to CBS News, those who pass a series of eligibility, medical, and security screenings would qualify to fly to the United States with refugee status, offering beneficiaries permanent residency, housing assistance, a path to American citizenship. Apparently, the eligible population is expected to be relatively small. The White House spokesperson said the United States has already helped more than 1,800 American citizens and their families leave Gaza, many of whom have come to the United States. Okay, if they're already American citizens, that's a different thing. We owe it to American citizens abroad, whatever their predilections or nationalities, to bring them home. With that said, bringing home thousands of additional people who almost certainly cheered October 7th is total crazy towns. Meanwhile, what are the other insane policies that Joe Biden is pushing in the Middle East? So you remember that dumb humanitarian pier that the United States is now building out in the middle of the Mediterranean to get the humanitarian aid in? And there are some of us who are asking, well, hold up a second. So you're going to build a humanitarian aid pier, and you're going to bring ships to that pier, and then you're going to unload the cargo onto that pier, and then that aid still has to get in there to the areas that are currently run by Hamas. How do you support doing this? And won't that put American troops in harm's way? So Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, was asked this by Matt Gaetz yesterday. Isn't it possible that you might end up like in a shooting war with Hamas? And he's like, well, yeah, that could happen.
Ms. Locken just said there'll be about 1,000 U.S. service members operating a Pier system off of Gaza. How many of them will have guns, Mr. Secretary?
Well, typically all of the deployed service members carry guns, and they have the ability to protect themselves if challenged.
So if someone from land in Gaza shoots at our service members who are on the $320 million pier that we're building, you're telling me our service members can shoot back?
They have the right to return fire to protect themselves. Now,
well, do we think that's like? So now I want to move to the likelihood that you think someone from land in Gaza might shoot at our service members on this pier. Do you think that that's a likely scenario?
That's possible. Yes.
Okay, so he is now admitting that putting American service people directly in the line of fire from Hamas is now the Biden administration position. Totally crazy. Totally insane. You know how the humanitarian crisis in Gaza ends? When Israel extirpates Hamas. That's when the humanitarian crisis begins to end. Until then, it's just going to suck over there for obvious reasons because Hamas runs the place. But Joe Biden, again, he keeps trying to play it. He keeps trying to play both sides. He keeps trying to... Right now, he's got Tony Blinken back in Israel trying to cut a deal between Israel and Hamas in which Hamas would release somewhere between 20 and 30 remaining alive hostages out of the 133 they supposedly held, most of whom I'm sure are dead. Israel, in return, would release 1,000 terrorists. That's being brokered by the United States. The United States instead should be saying to Israel, go ahead and finish this up so everybody can get back to their normal daily affairs. But Joe Biden won't do that because, again, Joe Biden is a terrible, terrible president. He is truly bad at this. Okay, coming up, we are going to get into various members of the entertainment media who are now attempting to prop up the Joe Biden campaign run Oh man, you're not going to believe some of this video and audio. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.